I knew we were going to be better in 2024 because of our leadership, particularly on defense. And my biggest concern as we go into 2025 is replacing that leadership.
Hello and welcome. It's always college football. Today is Monday, May 12th, and we really appreciate you coming to us from wherever it is you're coming to us from. We have a great show for you today. Shane Beamer, the head coach of the South Carolina Gamecocks, will join the show, have a great discussion with him, their breakthrough 2024 campaign, how the expectations are very different coming into the season this year, and how can they take that next step as a program, knowing that there are so many losses and so much leadership loss, especially on the defensive side, but they are well positioned with LaNorris Sellers returning for his second year as a starting quarterback. So going to have a great visit with him. We're going to dive into a story that made some headway last week. That is the Landmark College Sports Commission. And this is going to be kind of an interesting topic. We're going to kind of tell you what it is. And then we're also going to break down what would be my first priority if for whatever reason I were put on that commission, which I would love to allow myself to volunteer. If for whatever reason I was on that commission, what would be my first priority? And I think there's some ways that we can kind of talk through shaping NIL, shaping transfer portal, and other areas surrounding the support. And then we are also going to dive into, I think, a great college football player who unfortunately injuries derailed his career and what it could have been, but allow us just for a moment to celebrate the success of Cam Rising. So often we celebrate the guys that go on and have very, very successful NFL careers. That's not going to happen for Cam Rising, but there were some breakthrough moments in his career that I think all of us as college football fans can celebrate. So let's dive in and kick things off with the conversation with Shane Beamer. He's the head coach of the South Carolina Gamecocks. He's Shane Beamer. Coach, I remember vividly you getting up there at Media Days last year and saying, we're better than you guys realize. You don't understand. Like, we are going to kick some tail this year. And everybody at the time was like, heck yeah, he's promoting his program. And then fast forward throughout the year, and you might have undersold just how good y'all were going to be. At what point last year did you know you were onto something really special?
Man, well, I felt that way going into the season, Greg, and thanks for having me on for sure. You know, I felt that way going into the season just because we had so many older guys coming back. And you know, from being around this game for so long, particularly in today's college football, if you're an old senior-led team, you got a chance to be successful. And that's what we had, especially on defense. And I knew we had a, new quarterback that was talented, and it might take a little bit for him to, really get going, but we had the right pieces around him. But I would say, and I think you did the game, I would say Kentucky, week 2. You walked, I was up in Louisville last weekend for the Kentucky Derby, and I was around a lot of UK fans, and we were talking, like, at the time, that was a huge game. Week 2, there were high expectations for Kentucky last season at that time. They had just beaten Southern Miss the week before. That was a very pivotal game in our season because all the experts out there looked at our game against Kentucky week 2 and said, if they don't win this game, I don't see the path to 6 wins for this team, talking about us. And then for us to go up to Lexington and play as well as we did, especially on defense, I walked out of that game thinking, we're pretty salty on defense, even more so than I thought. And then LaNorris, our quarterback, made some plays in that game. He threw a touchdown pass to a freshman receiver, threw a pass to a freshman tight end. You just kind of saw us that we had the right pieces in place, and certainly walked off that field a lot more confident. Not that I wasn't, but really convicted about the kind of team we could be.
Well, I remember those 2 plays, and we were on the call, and the game was pretty remarkable because it got sideways, but it was as if those 2 plays that LaNorris made, it was like that was the catapult. It was 2 plays, and it wasn't a lot. It was a big 3rd down, right? And I think he evaded a sack and hit it, and it was an amazing play. And then he hit Mazio, I think, on the corner down the left sideline. It was like that was it. Yeah. And then from that point forward, and you had told us before, you'd said if he gets to be where he's as confident as he can be, sky's the limit. And you saw that progress happen over the course of the season. Now that he's gone into this upcoming year as a second-year starter, how different is LaNorris the person as opposed to the player?
Yeah, great question. And, and you're right. He made some plays in that game with his feet. Now, we got hit one time because he missed a blitz pickup and he had to get himself out of the trouble. But he made plays in that game. And I knew he would continue to get better as the year went on. Because if you remember, there was a period of that game where he got knocked out and he wasn't in the game for a couple series. And then the next week we played LSU. He didn't play the whole second half. So really the Ole Miss game, which I think was game 5 for us, that was the first game that he played in its entirety. So he continued to get better throughout the year. He's continued to get better since the season ended through January, February, and then March and April with spring practice. But to answer your question, I think his life has changed a lot. And you're, the quarterback at the University of South Carolina. That's already you're on a pedestal. You're from South Carolina, an hour down the road from Florence. And you're even more so on a pedestal. And just with as good a player he is, it's different. And I know just from talking to him a little bit, during the season, you're kind of in your bubble and you go to class and you come to football and you're on your routine. I think for him, and I don't want to speak for LaNorris, but just in having some conversations with him, I think he really realized that after the Clemson game, where you've got a month where we're not playing a game and you can kind of be a normal person a little bit more. And certainly after that Clemson game and the plays that he made in that game, if people didn't already know about him, they knew about him nationally, even more so after that game. But I think he's handled it really well. He's a great young man. He's got a great humility about himself. He's very steady. Nothing bothers him. I mean, he's sitting here, one of the premier quarterbacks in all of college football, and a couple days ago, he's texting me for the summer schedule for the workouts, times each day, because he's arranging an internship that he's got to do this summer for his major. Just stuff like that. So he's got his priorities in order, and is handling his life that's changed. He's handling it well.
I can only imagine what it must be like to be a guy that was that good. And you could even tell, and look, he's a freshman. Like, if you made me start as a redshirt freshman, it would have been a disaster. So, I think to myself, it's almost like he just got by on just pure natural ability and instincts. And now with Mike Shula leading the charge, and I love Mike. I think he's a phenomenal quarterback coach and has seen it from that perspective, having played the position in the SEC of all things. I think his plan pre-snap and his plan post-snap, once those marry up to go along with just the natural God-given ability, the sky's the limit. So has that been a focal point for him this offseason, is just have a plan on every single snap?
Absolutely. And you're exactly right about Mike Shula. He's been awesome, has made him better already, talking about LaNorris. And anytime you've got a guy that has not only played the position, but played the position in the SEC, like Coach Shula did, it's a huge benefit for LaNorris. And then the fact that Mike has coached quarterbacks at a high level and coordinated offenses at a high level in the NFL for a long time, it's really been good for LaNorris. And LaNorris will be the first to tell you that he needed that as well. And they've really attacked that, and just the timing of drops and knowing protections and when you're picked up and when you're not protected and when you have to get rid of the ball and where to go. Because there's a lot of plays that he made with his feet last year. Some were just, we didn't protect very well and he got hit. But there were times, like I was alluding to, where maybe he wasn't protected and realized that a little bit too late and got hit and got himself out of trouble and turned it into a 40-yard runner pass. I'm all for those, but I'd love just the quickness and the decision-making and things like that to be even more efficient, which it will be. I mean, he's his second year as a starter. He's still young. It's only his third year in our program. And he knows there's a lot of work to do, but he'll just be so much more experienced. We've tried to help him a little bit with Mike taking over as the coordinator. We haven't changed the terminology, but we've certainly tweaked some things to hopefully make it even more efficient and easier for LaNorris and the rest of the offensive guys going forward.
Again, and this is no slight to the receiving core last year, but you could just tell some of the most productive guys were also young. Mazio was awesome. Van Jacobs did a lot of great things. But you look at Josh Simon, he's now gone, but he might have been the guy that was most reliable in the bunch. He could have made a case outside of LaNorris. He was your MVP in some cases on offense. Now, though, that Nick is now focusing on football in the spring, looking at his potential progress, Nick Harbor, that is, the progress of the other two sophomores that I referenced, the addition of some of the young guys that you've now added to the health that you're going to have back with the guys that are sticking around, how will that receiver core look different than it did a year ago?
Yeah, it's going to look a lot different. Those guys are a year older, and two of those guys you just mentioned, and you alluded to it. Nick Harbor was running tracks. He didn't go through spring practice last year. Vandravius Jacobs, he didn't transfer here from Florida State until after spring practice, so he didn't go through the spring. Dale Vaughn Campbell was one of our receivers. He didn't go through spring practice with us because he transferred in the summertime. So all of the receivers were here for spring practice, which is great, except for one, Donovan Murph, a high school young man that we signed from right here in Columbia. We had 5 freshman receivers. They graduated high school early and went through spring practice. All of them were highly recruited and highly touted, and rightfully so. They've made progress and will make us better. And then their arrivals has really made Nicholas Harbor and Jared Brown and Mazio and our other receivers really have to elevate their games with the arrival of these freshman receivers. And nobody's anointing the freshmen right now, but they're talented. And they were highly recruited for a reason. And they've got size. So I think we're longer at wide receiver than maybe we were last year. They've got size, they got athleticism, they got speed. They're a talented group of guys, and overall we're deeper at wide receiver. There's no question about it. There's a lot of competition because you're exactly right. Really, Josh Simon, and you did our A&M game. Josh Simon was our weapon on offense in the passing game, and not that those other guys weren't. Nick Harbor's made some great plays last season, but Josh was a guy that could really make things happen with the ball in his hands. And that's what I like about the receiving crew that we'll have this year is Nicholas Harbor and these other guys. They've really improved their, ability to get open, but even more so their run after the catch ability as well, where they can catch a pass, they can break a tackle, and they can help us create even more explosive plays.
Yeah, what a difference that would make. That's for sure. Look forward to seeing the progress of that group. The offensive line, we know your tackles are set. We know the answer's there. Internally, though, I know there's constant competition. There's some new faces. So collectively, how do you feel about your offensive line unit?
I like it. It's you alluded to the tackles, and we're returning a starter in Kason Henry on the right side and Josiah Thompson on the left side. Both of those guys are really good players and performed well for us. Josiah was a true freshman last year, but we have depth there too. Tree Babalade's back for another year. He started as a true freshman back in 2023. He's pushing Josiah and Kason, and they're competing along with Jatavius Shivers as well. So that's a really good competition. Certainly we lost our starting center and we lost both guards, and that's the interior of your offensive line. But we brought in some transfer guys. Boaz Stanley transferred here from Troy. We're excited about what he did as our center during the spring. Nick Sharp from Wake Forest, Rodney Newsom from Western Kentucky. But if you look at our recruiting over the last few years, we've recruited really well on the offensive line. And it's time for those guys to be the players that we know they are. And that's Marquis Anderson, who we signed a couple years ago and had to beat everybody in the country for. And that's Shed Surratt, who we just signed as a true freshman and went through spring practice with us and has a chance to help us. That's Trovon Ball, who started as a true freshman at guard back in 2023. So we've recruited well at that position a lot, and there's other guys there as well. And need those guys to step up. We're athletic there, I think. And we've recruited well, so I feel good about it. But anytime you have to replace your, starting center in Vershawn Lee, who was our starting center since I've been here, basically, or a starter on the offensive line, that's a concern. But I like the group that we have, and you're fortunate. We're fortunate. You're right that we have 2 tackles that have a lot of experience in this program.
And Josiah grew up a lot last year too. I remember, some freshman moments early, and he started to figure it out. You started to see his potential come out as the season went along last year too. I'm still an offensive guy at heart. We'll get to your defense, I promise, Coach. But I have to ask you about the replacement for Rocket Sanders, because Rocket Sanders, you don't have favorites. He was one of my favorites in football the last several years, even prior to his arrival in South Carolina. I just love the kid. I love the story. And I thought he had a great career. But he is now having to be replaced, and those are big shoes. You go out and you get Rashul Faison, who, if you haven't watched this guy, guys, watch this kid. He can go. Oscar Attaway's back. You have others as well that are all in the mix for carries. But what was it about Faison that made you think, all right, this is the guy that can adequately replace what Rocket Sanders meant?
Yeah, we were certainly looking for a guy to replace Rocket, somebody that had that home run ability that can take an 8 yard gain or a run that's blocked for 5 yards and can turn it into an explosive run. And that's what we saw when we watched him. Was I think he's got great vision, he's got great balance, he can make people miss, but he can also run you over. And he's got a good way out of the backfield as well in the passing game also. And then the other thing that we liked when you watch his tape, for a guy coming from Utah State, he played you anybody. Whether we signed Nick Sharp, I mentioned the offensive lineman. Well, immediately he went to Wake Forest. I'm going to watch Wake Forest play Clemson, and I'm going to watch Wake Forest play Ole Miss last year. And you see how he performed in those games. It's the same thing with Sewell. You watched his games against Southern Cal and Utah, and he played really well in those games against really good teams. So that's what stood out to us. And then he's an older guy. He's got a great story getting here. So I like that. And then just overall, I really like that group. It's I don't want to say necessarily that we're better because we're losing a really talented running back in Rocket Sanders, but there's no question. I think we have the chance to be better overall because we're deeper and we're a year older. Oscar Attaway returns. Rocket didn't play in the bowl game for us, and Oscar did some nice things in that bowl game. Had a long touchdown run on a fourth down that we went for. We've added Sewell, and then two young guys that we're really excited about. Matthew Fuller is a true freshman, or was a true freshman last year, and then Jawarn Howe was in his first year in our program last year after transferring from South Carolina State. Both those guys, I think both those guys have the chance to be really good running backs here at South Carolina. So we've got, four, and then Bradley Dunn's a guy that's been in our program since I got here that's got experience also. And I think we'll be better with those running backs. Not that Rocket wasn't, but I think these guys are really good at running routes and being able to get open and they've got a good feel for the passing game and just to be another outlet for LaNorris when things hopefully they don't break down, but if they break down, being able to utilize the running backs in the passing game also.
Well, now that we've gotten all the important parts of the team out of the way, I guess we'll move to the defense. Look, that last year's group was, I don't want to say freakish because that often has like a negative connotation, but to me in football, that's like the most positive thing you can say. Like freakishly violent is how I describe your group. I mean, you just had guys that were violent. But you had pros. I mean, that's what I think I love most about watching your guys from start to finish last year. You had pros that were playing college football, guys that approached it the right way, that were veterans, that had won games, that had participated in the highs and the lows of the organization. And you had guys that just went about it the right way. I know we'll get to the production, but first and foremost, how do you replace the leadership that you had on that side of the ball?
It's my biggest concern that I have right now because – as I alluded to at the beginning of the call, I knew we were going to be better in 2024 because of our leadership, particularly on defense. And my biggest concern as we go into 2025 is replacing that leadership. Now, we've got certainly capable guys. DQ Smith is a leader on our defense. He's about to be a 4-year starter at safety for us. Jalen Kilgore and Judge Collier, they're multi-year starters for us now. Nick Barrett's a guy, it's his 5th year in our program, but now he's in a position, he's the old guy on defense, and he's made of the right stuff. He's getting ready to graduate here this weekend from South Carolina. So we've got people, but that's a lot of leadership that we're replacing off last year's defense. And for us, it's, you've played the game. It starts back in January, and you can't force anybody to be somebody that they're not. I tell people all the time, two of the greatest leaders I was ever around as a coach was back in 2017 when I was an assistant coach at Georgia, and we had Roquan Smith and Nick Chubb. And they're two of the greatest leaders and players I've ever been around. They weren't super vocal guys, but what they're about as people, their work ethic, they couldn't help but earn the respect of their teammates. And that's what we're trying to do. It's just, guys, one, handle your own business. And so you're somebody worth following. But then also understanding that we're going to go, as you go. And we certainly have capable guys, but you try and put them in as many situations and environments as you can to help facilitate and develop that leadership maybe a little bit quicker. And then the summertime's coming up, and it'll be a critical summer for our guys on offense and defense to really see who can, take charge of this team and be the leaders that we need them to be.
Well, what I think was amazing last year, like I had Kyle Kennard the year before when he was at Georgia Tech. I called Georgia Tech, and he was a good player. Like, I liked him. You know what I mean? I thought there were some things to like about what Georgia Tech had on defense, but for whatever reason, defensively, they struggled that year. You guys watch the tape. You survey everybody. You go and get this young man named Kyle Kennard out of Georgia Tech, who's the 121st ranked prospect in the transfer portal. And he becomes, I think, as much of an impact difference maker at defensive end as there was, not just in the SEC, but maybe in all of college football. So how was it that you were able to identify those traits and be able to apply them to know what you might have had when he arrived on campus?
Yeah, great question. Coming off the 23 season, there was no doubt in our mind we needed to improve the pass rush, and it just wasn't what we needed to be, particularly at the edge position. In 23, we knew it needed to be better in 24. So you're looking for guys that have experience. We knew we had Dylan Stewart coming in, and you're automatically going to be better because you're adding him to the program. But we needed to bring some other people in as well. And with Kyle, you're right. He had a solid year at Georgia Tech, but I don't think he was on a lot of people's radars, hence the rating in the transfer portal. Yeah. I remember watching his game against Wake Forest that year, and you really see flashes of athleticism and twitch and the ability to bend and things like that. And we brought him in here. He's an older guy. He's a pro mentality in so many ways. And I'd like to say that I knew when we brought him in here, we knew he was going to be the SEC Defensive Player of the Year, but I'd be lying. I mean, he came in, and give credit to him. He worked his butt off, and he embraced how we develop our players here. We've got a pretty good track record of developing players within our program when they come in, whether it be high school or transfers. And Kyle bought into everything that we did. And I remember last summer, I was at the beach in July, probably right before I saw you at SEC Media Day in Dallas, and I had an NFL head coach call me. He was just in the summertime and was kind of looking ahead to the next year. And, hey, want to talk to you about some of your guys that are seniors. While I got some downtime, I just try and stay ahead of the college game. And I was talking about some of our guys that I knew would be draft eligible that he'd be interested in. And he brought up Kyle Kennard. And he's like, I tell you what, like, this guy you got from Georgia Tech is really a hell of a player and somebody that we're excited about. And I remember getting off that call thinking, he's really high on him. So I know we got a good player, but clearly they see something in him too that had me even more excited as we went into things. And you're right, he made a huge impact for us, and it was very evident from game one when we played Old Dominion, and then right into game two when we played Kentucky, like I said.
I think you have a handful of options to be that next Kyle Kennard. Granted, different position, but I think Brandon Cisse from NC State, I think that guy can go. Like, I'm a big fan of his, and I think he's going to give you some versatility there in the back end. Not that you need a ton of help back there. You got plenty of talent, but he's a guy I'm excited to see in a Gamecock uniform. Bigger picture, Coach, you have been a guy that has long thrived on the chip on the shoulder. Hey, we're going to go earn our respect. We're going to show you, and you're going to find out the hard way if you disrespect us. But now this year is a little bit different. It's like, hey, Gamecocks they're a problem. Gamecocks are a playoff contender. It's a very different preseason approach than what I think you've dealt with the last couple of years. So how have you handled it personally?
Yeah, great point. Last year, I don't want to say it was easy, but last year, a year ago at this time, it was easy. Everybody on the outside thought we were going to stink. I knew we had a good team. We had a bunch of guys that fed off that negativity and, okay, y'all don't think we're that good. We're going to show you. And that was easy. Now it's the other way around where, like you're saying, there's high expectations and people are telling our guys, how great it is. So it's something that for me personally, I've been very, cognizant of all the way back to January when we came back to start the spring semester, of being on high alert, making sure our guys don't think that just because it happened last season that it's going to happen this year. Because there's plenty of examples of teams that read their press clippings all summer, and then all of a sudden they got to the season and they got their face, beat in. And understanding that all the people that were talking about how bad we were going to be last year, they're the same ones telling us how great we're going to be this year, maybe, and that none of it matters. And I think it's easier now than ever in college football because our players realize that, are they better? Like, every year it's starting over. Yeah. And every year is truly a new team. And yeah, we've got a lot of pieces back, or a lot of players back from last season, but we got a lot of work to do as well. But there's excitement. We embrace those expectations. I want us to be picked high. I want people to have high expectations. There's no doubt about it. But being very intentional about the amount of work that went in to 2024 on and off the field, players, coaches, and staff, and making sure that we're doing even more of that this year. And I've been proud of the guys since we came back in January. That's very much been their mentality. I mean, there's not been a day where I sat there and say, these guys are complacent in any stretch of the imagination. I thought winter workouts went great, spring practice went great, and for as young as we are, especially on defense, I've been proud of just their maturity and how they handle their business.
I would imagine so. And then finally, Coach, do you believe in momentum year over year? Because I know you start over. I get that. But I do think that the positivity can at times be contagious at the same time. Well, yes, I want my guys to think the world hates them. That's awesome. That's easy. But I also think that if the guys are believing in the process and believing in what you're doing and believing in the messaging, that can also carry over, even if there's a 9-month gap between games. So is that something that you believe in?
Absolutely. Yeah. Every year is totally starting over. And it is a new team, but there's no question. I think you see that in recruiting, and I think you see that with just the overall program momentum from one year to the next. You look at once we started playing well last season, the momentum that created on the recruiting trail that has carried into 2025 from a recruiting standpoint. You look at it with our fan base. I'm doing Booster Club, Gamecock Club speaking engagements every week this time of year. And one thing that we talk about is, season ticket sales are super high. The season ticket renewal rate is like the highest it's ever been. The new Gamecock Club memberships is like the highest it's ever been. And that's a testament to everything that's going on here at South Carolina, but it's the momentum from football last season. And then specifically with the team, yeah, absolutely. And I think the main thing that I would say about that is the momentum from last season. Yeah, there's momentum. You saw that last year in the portal. We didn't lose anybody in the portal that was a surprise. In other words, our guys wanted to come back. That was never even an issue with anybody. They wanted to come back because they know what kind of team we can have in 2025. And there's still an edge that our team has because we fell short of the playoffs last year. I mean, we were proud of what we did, but nobody's sitting around here and, handing out trophies because we went 9-4 or 9-3 in the regular season and just fell 2 points short of being in the playoffs. There's an edge about, we didn't get in, and making sure that we do everything in our power that we don't leave it in other people's hands next season. And it's easier said than done, but certainly that stems from the momentum that we had last season that's carried over into 2025.
I know it will, Coach. You've done a tremendous job, and we appreciate very much how much time you've given us today. It's great to talk about your program, man. It's great to see the momentum y'all have, and we know you're going to have a great fall.
Thank you. Appreciate all you do, and love keeping up with you. It means a lot to be on with you today.
All right, buddy. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Now, so often in college football, we remember what you did last as a college football player. We remember your closing moments, what you did in your final year, and how you used that final year to catapult yourself to NFL stardom. Joe Burrow comes to mind. Joe Burrow is considered one of the all-time great college players in the history of LSU football, but there were 4 years of college in which it was a little bit up and down, where he served as a backup at Ohio State. His first year at LSU was a little up and down, but that last year, my goodness, breakthrough, national championship, Heisman Trophy. Therefore, he's considered an all-time great. The guy that I'm going to talk about today is someone I think that's worth celebrating. And I know that not all of you are fans of the Utah Utes. I don't expect very many people watching this show today to be diehard Utah Ute fans. And frankly, I think if you talked to some Utah Ute fans, they might not necessarily be as willing to celebrate Cam Rising's career as they probably should be. And it's partly because of the way things played out down the stretch and how he was gone for a year. You thought he was going to play week to week. So you thought, hey, well, he's going to go this week, maybe this week. And then he never ended up going. And then things came up short in the 2024 campaign. But I just want to take a moment to just acknowledge what Cam Rising meant to the Utah Ute program. This is a guy that led Utah to back-to-back Pac-12 championships. He kept USC out of the college football playoff. He led Utah to multiple New Year's Six bowl games, Rose Bowl, of course. He was the 2012 Pac-12 championship game MVP. And unfortunately, in that 2022 Rose Bowl game, where it was just, what an incredible game that was, still to this day, probably one of my favorite games just as a fan of the sport. to sit there and watch that game against Ohio State. And while that game didn't finish the way he wanted it to finish, he had a 62-yard run in that game. He threw for, 214 yards. He rushed, including that 62-yard run, for 92. And that game was back and forth, and it was just a remarkable seesaw battle between the Utes and the Buckeyes going toe-to-toe on the grandest stage in college football. He also, I think when you look at the performances that he had, he was first-team All-Pac-12. He was a semi-finalist for the Davey O'Brien. He was multiple preseason watch lists. I mean, pretty on everybody's watch list going into the season. But I think more than anything about Cam Rising is he is one of the poster children, if you will, of taking a program to new heights. And Utah had experienced remarkable success when they were a G5 program in the Mountain West. Tremendous, whether it was under Urban Meyer, the early season in 2008 when they went undefeated, beat us actually in the Sugar Bowl in 2008, but the undefeated season in 2004 behind Alex Smith, who went on to become the first overall pick. Utah is one of my favorite programs in the sport. Why? Because they started at a certain spot, and everything that they've gained, they've earned. Nothing's been given to Utah. It was product of merit, and it was the product of success at a lower level that they then parlayed into an opportunity to play in the Power Five. And it took a little while for them to get to the point where they could actually break through and win a conference championship, and they finally did so with Cam Rising at the helm. So just want to do just a little bit of a tribute to Cam Rising, who was a great college football player, and I just absolutely hate that his career has been cut short, joining a long list of great players who just never got to really experience the fullest potential of what they could become as a result of injury. So Cam, thanks for the memories. Appreciate all that you provided us as college fans, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully on a sideline as a coach here very soon. A huge story from last week was the announcement, the buzz surrounding the Landmark College Sports Commission. Now, as of this moment, what that commission is going to be, it's a presidential commission that is being led by the Trump administration, and it's an initiative to try to, calm the waters surrounding college football and kind of protect the sanctity of college sports as we know it. Because we already know, college sports, guys, you guys love college football. I love college football. When toe meets leather, it's the greatest sport on planet Earth. I will go to my grave believing that there is no better experience than being in a college football stadium on a Saturday in a rivalry game. It's the best thing ever. And any of you guys that have been there, you guys understand that. But there is reality surrounding our sport outside of the facility, outside of the stadium, that's become kind of uncomfortable for a lot of people. Whether you dislike NIL, whether you have a hard time relating to the players the way you once did, the transactional nature of the sport, the pay-for-play model, the arms race that we've experienced. College football is very different, especially in the off seasons, than it was 10, 12, 15 years ago when we only talked about returning production and how much a guy might grow from year one to year two as a starter. So this purpose of this commission are to tackle a few issues. All right. Name, images, and likeness. We know that. The transfer portal. We know that. I think they're going to determine whether or not athlete employment status is going to be a part of the conversation. Title IX will be a big part of this commission as well. Olympic sports, the stability within the conferences and whether or not relocation is going to continue to occur. And then just overall regulatory landscape. That's kind of where we're at here with this commission for college football, college sports. But I'm going to tell you this. If I were on this commission, and I would, like I said in the very beginning of the show, I would crawl through broken glass to just be in the room to hear the discussions. Now, Nick Saban is in line to become the co-chair. I don't think I can think of a better person to lead this commission and help illustrate to those members of the group how we can alter college football, how we can fix college football, how we can sustain what college football's been for 100 plus years, 150 years in some cases. So I love that Nick Saban's involved, but if I were on this commission, there's two things that I would try to iron out first. Okay. Number one, the transfer portal. And I've suggested this in the past, and it's been met with some positivity, and it's also been met with some criticism. And I'm great with that. I think that's the beauty of the topic, is it's polarizing. And everybody has a suggestion as to how it should be fixed. I've maintained for a while that the transfer portal being open in December and the transfer portal being open in May and April is challenging and problematic. One, it allows so much leverage for the players. It allows freedom of movement. Those of you that say, well, coaches can move freely, they can, but with a caveat. When a coach leaves from one job to go to the other, they have to pay back a buyout, or their future employer has to pay their previous employer a large sum of money for that coach's services. So there are some prohibitive aspects of coaches moving from one place to the other, but in college football with players, there are none. So I think that if we were to limit the amount of time that the portal was open, that would calm things down just a little bit. And what I've suggested in the past, and while it's in some cases unpopular, I think having the portal open the month of May is the best thing for the sport. Because the portal, at its infancy, was there as a mechanism for players to find better situations and for teams that had turnover or maybe were down on numbers, they could backfill some spots and create more depth. That's kind of what the portal was all about when it was brought on a handful of years ago. That was its intent. Now, it's obviously gone to the extreme now. But if we were to open it on May 1st and close it on May 31st, it would do a few different things for us. One, it would keep college football in the news. So from my perspective, that's a fantastic place to be. Think about how much traction we would get in May if players were leaving one place and going to another. Okay, that's the first thing that it would do. And I think keeping the sport in the news year round is beneficial for the sport's overall popularity. Why is the NFL the biggest show in all of American sports? Because they go from the Super Bowl to the combine to the draft to OTAs, and then training camp starts. They're never out of the news cycle. So I think that would keep college football in the news, in the mainstream news in May, in a time in which the sport is a little bit quiet. That's one. Number two, as a result of the transfer portal, there have been several programs that have put a high priority on going out and trying to sign 21 and 22-year-old kids. So they put the priority on going and getting experience and more mature athletes. But on the back burner are the high school players. And I don't love that opportunities are being taken away from high school players in favor of guys that are 21 and 22 years old. I think if we move the portal window to May, there would be a renewed emphasis for programs across the country to put a higher priority on the high school talent who could join their roster in January, go through fall, go through spring, go through winter workouts, go through summer, and then hopefully be ready to play come fall. I want to see more focus on high school players getting opportunities as opposed to players that are on their fourth school in 5 years. Number three, what I think this would do is it would calm things down as far as players leaving from one place to go to another in search of a starting spot or guarantees, because at that point, these coaches might think, hey, you know what? Our quarterback room's in pretty good shape. We might not need to take one this year. Spring went better than we anticipated. We don't need to take a guy. We'll only take guys that we absolutely have to have. So you'd see less people going in the portal, and I think you'd see less coaches going and poaching off other rosters, because at that point, they'll have a little more clarity about what their roster might look like upon the completion of their spring practice activities. And then four, I think all of us, well, several of you that are watching the show have been in college before. Several of you have been 18, 19, 21. I think that at the end of the season, if the season didn't go the way you wanted it to go, we have a tendency to make emotional decisions. Decisions that might not necessarily be in the best interest of our long-term development as a player. I know this for certain. I went to Alabama in 2006. I went to play for Mike Shula. Mike Shula was fired after the Iron Bowl in the 2006 season. Had the portal been open 10 or 11 days later after Mike Shula was fired, would I have potentially jumped in because there was so much uncertainty surrounding the future of the Alabama program? It's possible. Had I jumped in the portal Would I have been able to play for Nick Saban and lead Alabama to a national championship as their starting quarterback in 2009? Probably not. I would have made an emotional decision. It had been a decision that I would have regretted for the rest of my life. And I'm sure there's a lot of those examples out there for college sports. But if there is no portal to be opened in December, maybe I would have just seen it through. Maybe I would have just continued to go forward. Maybe when a new coach comes in and a player wasn't recruited by that coach, doesn't have a relationship with that coach, maybe that gives this player the chance to evaluate the coach throughout winter workouts and throughout the spring and say, you know what, maybe I actually do fit really well in this defensive scheme. Maybe I actually really like the way the coach handles the wide receiver room. Maybe the situation that I am looking to potentially leave is actually the best situation for me to reach my potential down the road. So I think moving the portal from May 1st to May 31st would be an amazing move for college football. And I think this commission could potentially do that. That would be a high priority for me. The other thing I think would be beneficial is to calm things down from an NIL standpoint. I look at these NIL deals, and one school's contract language is different from another school's and another school's and another school's. If we were to universally adopt contract language that every school must adhere to, that would be remarkably beneficial. Now, I'm not saying it has to be the same numbers or the same. For instance, if one school can pay $1 million and the other school can pay $500,000, that's fine. The amount is different from school to school and player to player. But if the language is universally the same, then we won't have front-loaded contracts. We won't have guys that are getting paid up front, and then after they don't like their spring circumstances, they're getting in the portal, and then they have to potentially pay back the money, or they didn't get it, or now they're getting sued by their former school because they owe money for having taken it up front. Now they're not going to be on the team. I think if we were to adopt universal NIL language, that would be extremely beneficial long-term for the players and I think for the schools. And then finally, if we can't adjust the portal and if we can't create universal language with our NIL agreements for these schools, then how about we potentially look at the possibility of creating buyout language in a lot of these contracts? So it doesn't have to be a massive hurdle for these players to move from school to school, but there's a little one. Well, if I leave, then I might have to write a check to the school that I was most recently at. Would that cause just a little bit of doubt in a player's mind when it comes from going from one place to the next? Potentially. I think that would calm things down. I'm not saying it would completely eradicate what we've seen as far as portal movement, but I do think it would calm things down just a little bit. And then finally, the last thing I would try to do in this college sports commission, and we talked a little bit about this with Curt Cignetti last week, the head coach of the Indiana Hoosiers. I would find a way to subsidize, whatever that looks like, to subsidize the programs that need help. And that might qualify as a group of 5 program. That might qualify as an FCS program. That might qualify as D2 or D3. But right now, college football offers opportunities to kids of all skill levels. And that's a wonderful thing. Playing college football was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And right now, because of how much money is going to the top dogs and how some of the smaller schools are struggling to get by, there are athletic directors that are considering the possibility of, man, we just can't afford to continue to support financially a football program. And I think down the road, it's going to become even more of a strain on these athletic departments in the FCS level and the D2 level and so on and so forth. We need to figure out a way to subsidize those schools. If that means taking just a sliver of the college football playoff revenue, then by all means, let's do it. If that means taking just a sliver from the ACC's contract, the SEC's contract, the Big Tens, the Big 12s, just a sliver, just a tiny amount, a fraction, a rounding error, just a tiny amount to subsidize all levels of football, that is something I can absolutely get behind. It protects those levels, those kids that are playing the game just truly for the love of the game. And I think that would be advantageous to the overall health of the sport here in the near term. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. We always appreciate those of you that stop in. I don't expect us to always agree, but I do appreciate always getting your perspective when it comes to these really polarizing topics in the sport. But we are healthy. We are in a great, great spot. And I think that in the future, we're going to be in an even better spot if we can just calm the waters just a little bit. But for all of us here at Always College Football, we encourage you to like, rate, subscribe, wherever you get the podcast here on the ESPN College Football YouTube channel. Please continue to support the program. Tell your friends that we're talking college football, high-level, intellectual college football conversation here every single day on Always College Football. So for all of us here at ACF, from Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.